To this UNESCO Chair seminar series. My name is Makoe. I'm the holder of the UNESCO Chair on Open Distance Learning, and I'm your host today. And it's really a great pleasure to have among us Professor Paul Prinsloo. Professor Prinsloo and I have come a long way, Paul. We've come a long way. I remember when I first had interactions with Paul, I think Unisa was going through a massive conceptual transformation, and there was a lot of task teams that were set up, and I found myself serving in the same task team with him. And we had the privilege of being chaired by the late Professor George Ossietzky. So some of the documents that you will come across that come from that, there are documents that set out what needed to be done in order to galvanize exactly what the chairs are trying to do right now. So we are operating under the shadow and the footprints of a process or a series of processes that were started a long time ago. And we are privileged now, Paul, you might know, can you switch that off? It's mine. We are privileged now that we also have the Commonwealth Chair on open educational resources, just been newly created, and it's chaired by Professor Makoe. But we are all a team that deals with that. So Professor Prinsloo is going to talk to us about, I think, a very important but equally provocative area called learning analytics. I'm not sure, and I'll put it to you even before you start. I'm not sure whether when Paul goes about with learning analytics, because he will tell you it's about data, whether he justifies profiling us, because you'll hear there are those concerns that how far do you go in gathering data, but at the same time remember that we are an open distance learning institution. We cannot say to ourselves that we are dealing with students that are not here, but we don't know about them. So we need to know about them, but I think Paul will take you through that. How do we find that thin balance of respecting POPI, but at the same time utilizing the data so that it enables us to get a grip on who our students are? And with that, I'll ask our newly minted postdoctoral fellow, Dr. Sielezo, to introduce Professor Prinsloo for us. Come over here. This is Dr. Sielezo from the Botswana Open University. She's our postdoctoral fellow. She just started about 2-3 weeks ago. So I'm putting her in the core phase of things.
Thank you, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning to you. I must confess that it's a great privilege to be given the honor to introduce our colleague and academician, Professor Prinsloo, because to some of us, we've read his works, we have met him virtually, but we've never really met him physically. So it's a double privilege to some of us. Nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues from the UNESCO Chair's Office, it's a privilege and honor for me to introduce to yourselves Professor Paul Prinsloo this morning, who is a presenter and facilitator at our morning seminar. Professor Paul Prinsloo is a research professor in open and distance learning, ODL, in the Department of Business Management in the College of Economic and Management Sciences, University of South Africa, Unisa, since 2015. He's also a visiting professor at the Karl von Ossietzky University at Oldenburg, Germany. In 2019, the National Research Foundation, NRF, in South Africa awarded Paul with a B3 rating, confirming his considerable international reputation for the high quality and impact of his research outputs. He is also a fellow of the European Distance and E-Learning Network, EDEN, and serves on several editorial boards. Ladies and gentlemen, his academic background includes fields as diverse as theology, art history, business management, online learning, and religious studies. Paul is an internationally recognized speaker, scholar, and researcher, and has published numerous articles in the fields of teaching and learning, student success in distance education context, learning analytics, and curriculum development. His current research focuses on the collection, analytics, and use of student data in learning analytics, graduate supervision, and digital identity. At this morning's event, Professor Prinsloo shall be facilitating the seminar titled Learning Analytics in an Open and Distance Learning Environment. Ladies and gentlemen, I thank you, and Professor Prinsloo, the podium is yours. Thank you.
Colleagues, thank you. All protocol observed, but a special thanks to Prof. Ossietzky. He invited me to train with him for the Comrades. I just see on his Facebook page how he trains, and I'm very jealous. I changed the title slightly. Learning analytics as a notion or as a phenomenon is fairly abstract and may have scared people. So learning analytics is the collection, the measurement, the analysis, and the use of student data. And very interesting, and I thank Professor Ossietzky and his team for forcing me to think, how will this work in open distance learning? It's very easy to speak about how we will collect data and use data in higher education or in a face-to-face institution. And this made me to think really hard, how will this look at Unisa and what are the indications? My presentation is fairly resource-rich and image-rich, so I just want to acknowledge that I do not own the copyright of any of the images used. And I published this presentation this morning on SlideShare, and I tweeted the link, and you're welcome to find it there. So when we look at the collection of data, and then student data in higher education, I'll get back to distance education a bit later. When we think of the student walk or the student journey, you have pre-enrollment inquiries. They would phone Unisa. Bad move. No one will answer. They will try to phone Unisa, and they may eventually get through to someone, and we don't have a record who they phoned, how long the telephone rang, whether anyone cared to answer, or whether ever anyone gave information. But they were pre-enrollment inquiries. If they were really persistent, they would have sent an email. Who knows who answered the email? And whether the email was answered, they may actually visit the Sunnyside campus, but we don't have, the data is there of these visits, but I don't know where that data is, but there is information, and I would like to propose to you this morning, is very valuable information if I can just lay my hands on it. Then they enter Unisa. Then we capture their demographic data on the registration form, their pre-entry academic data, their model ski schools, their quantile schools, their engagement, and then they engage with a student advisor, no record. They engage with student counseling, no record, or not a record that I have access to, okay? Or maybe that student counseling gives a record of, not in digital format, an issue I will return to later. They may engage with persons at finance, and they may have a record. They may engage with a faculty member, they may have a record, and they may actually engage with the library. So we have these scattered pockets of data of their engagement, their inquiries, things that we could have used or learned from, but it's there. Then they enroll for courses that are also overlapped. You see the overlap there. Also hosted on the learning management system. They must log on to my Unisa. They leave a footprint. When did they log on? What date did they log on? What date did they last log on? And in which course? I would love us to track the same of our lectures. When last did you log on? How often do you log on? But that's the information we have. Then they may engage with an e-tutor, student advising, with counseling, with finance, faculty, library, in the learning management system or outside of the learning management system. Think data, think where the data goes and who has access to the data. and then hopefully they will be successful, and then they will re-enroll, and another set of inquiries, visits, or post-enrollment. What happens to that data? Now we have a digital body with the name of Paul at Unisa. I have a dossier here, I have a file. What happens to that data? And how do Unisa use this data to still keep contact with me and find out what happened to me? I passed my first degree at Turkey's 1979, and they still contact me. so they keep my file alive. Okay? So from pre-enrollment to or post-enrollment, we collect data, but they also share data, an issue that I will come back later. So it's not only the surveillance of students and collecting the footprints that they leave, they also share data, sometimes voluntary, but also often required. Am I in trouble?
No, we just
I just thought I overstayed my welcome. Professor.
I'm trying to make
This is something I said.
I'm trying to make it more user-friendly.
Thank you. Yeah, it's very bad habits to cross in front of the
Yes.
You're very kind. So you have from pre-enrollment, oh bless your soul, thank you. Post-enrollment, we collect data. And so everything happens there, but we're not the only one collecting the data. We're not the only one measuring student and analyzing student data. Welcome to the world of student data. There is, I'm getting back to that distinctions, there's the information they shared during the registration. This is what they do on the LMS. But there's higher education, and then there's all these. They buy books on Amazon, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, their location, and Google. And who plays in this field? Individuals, corporates, governments, increasingly data brokers, people that would get email addresses from staff, and then suddenly you will get an email from a provider. And you wonder, where the hell did you get my email from? And I'm not talking about the DA before the election. So there's people that make money from our data. Okay, and then we have fusion centers, people that specialize in combining your data of what you bought at Clicks with what you bought at Edgar's, with your home loan, and how many alcohol you consume on a week-to-week basis.
God, my husband does all.
Okay, so that's the field. Now let me just get back to this interesting distinction here. There's directed, automated, and gifted. Directed is the information that we require from students to fill in on their registration form. Very directed. That's surveys that researchers, an element that I will return back later, that researchers use. Send out a survey is a directed. Then there's automated, the clicks on my Unisa. It's automated when you swipe your card it clicks, that affinity card, that exclusive book card, it's automated, it registers you. And then there's gifted, you share what you've run on Saturday, and you share what you drank and what you ate and what your cat's name is. We gift information. And somehow someone builds a picture of us. And increasingly higher education is also collecting data from students' location. Campuses in Australia is using your Wi-Fi signal on your phone to see how many times did you use that bathroom. And then it gets creepy.
Yeah.
Because how many times how does the number of times I go to the toilet link to your interest in my success rate? Okay, so, but this is the field. What I'm posing to you is how and why, and there's two questions, and that's never a good survey. How and why is the collection, measurement, analysis, and use of student data in distance, online, and distributed learning different or more important than in residential and traditional education? Can we talk how is it different? Anyone, please. How is what we collect from students different from what happens at Tukkies? And why is what we collect possibly more important than when Tukkies collect data? Any ideas? And suddenly it looked like a prayer meeting. There was hands at the back. Any other questions? Oh, then there's two at the back. Sorry. Yes, please continue.
There's one.
Do they collect different data from your gut feeling?
Depends on the focus, obviously. What are you focusing on? What kind of data are you using?
Okay, interesting. Why do the Tukkies collect data? Why?
To answer certain questions.
To answer, what are the questions?
I don't
We'll hand it at the back.
I just wanted to say, just like she said, the context is different. So for instance, Unisa is really an audio institution compared to Turkeys, which they have blended activities. So when by that, I want to believe that those who collect data from Unisa students, they have some things that they target from Unisa students. For instance, they may expect that Unisa students, by virtue of the fact that they are distance learning students, may actually require some assistance, which will be predominantly related to things that are virtual, and perhaps they can explore that or exploit that to their advantage compared to students who are from
One hand at the back, and then sir, you, the two gentlemen. It's good that the gentlemen follow the lead.
That's fine. So in my experience, when I was a student at Tukkies, we used to take like actual surveys in the class, and that was because like 10% of your module mark was going towards class attendance because it's a residential.
So what I hear there is a survey, but we also use for assessment purposes
Yeah.
to evaluate whether you're actually learning and whether to check whether you're in class.
Yeah. And right now at Unisa, what is happening is that most of the services I'm taking have to do with whether I'm interacting with the actual coursework.
Okay.
Because there's like a lot of, there's usually a gap between, in my experience, when we start the module in the beginning of the semester and when we write the exam. Sometimes you stay like 2 months without touching your study material, and that's because there's like a lot of things.
Life.
And life happening. And you find your tutor will then put out a survey to say are you guys okay? What are you struggling with, that type of thing. So yeah, it has more to do with the actual interaction with the study material.
Okay,
Yeah.
interesting. And then sir there at the back, and then
I think my view is different.
it's different. Okay.
As far as the collection of data is concerned, I don't see any difference between these two types of learning institutions. Because yes, I think it's all is in our head. Because we think Unisa is an open distance learning, therefore the information might be different from West of Pretoria or now or whatever. But I don't think that the difference, because I've been a student at conventional universities, West of Pretoria, Stellenbosch, Medusa, and Unisa. But as far as my information is concerned, I was not giving any different information because of the particular institution. No.
Okay.
That's my own thing.
Thank you, sir. Your view?
Well, I guess location is going to factor in because one of our concerns obviously is where are our students? Do they have access to certain resources? Because they have to use their own resources to access like Unisa, etc. Whereas if they're registered students at Tukkies, I would imagine they probably get internet access on campus, etc. They're there, they're on the campus, so that's sort of sorted. So yeah, we would need basically to find out if our students are actually capable of even accessing our material, whereas the Tukkies that would be more or less taken for granted, I would think.
Is it something I said? Go in peace. So I think on the first question, I would agree with the gentleman there that both institutions, Stickies and Unisa, collect whatever information they can. Trust me on that one. Whether we're going to use it or not. Students use their student card at Stickies to actually enter the restaurant. And that data goes somewhere. They don't do anything with that data except to see how many people bought a hamburger. But they don't use it to correlate students' eating habits with their student success, which happens on other campuses. Okay? Is the use of data at Unisa more important than at Stickies?
Yeah, I think so.
And why is it more important? We know it's important, but why do you think it should be or it is more important for Unisa? Nadine?
I would think my gut instinct would say that we don't have the privilege of having that face-to-face contact and having them in the same geographical space as us. So we need to understand it as much as possible in terms of what they are doing and how they are doing it in order to inform the ways that we should be teaching.
So you talk my language, but now you have 5,000 students. How do you do that? You no, okay, sir.
I think it is this data for decision-making purposes.
What decision? Who's making the decisions? What decisions are made?
About way forward.
Oh, that sounds like a principal speech. We need data to plot the way forward.
Yes.
What do you mean?
I'm saying this because we can only go forward when we watch.
Trust me, you can go backwards.
Go sideways.
No. We need data to plan, but on module level, on user diversity level, do you use data, student data, to map the module for next semester?
Yes.
Yes, how do you use State Student to map the pedagogy strategies that was actually in the tutorial letter that you wrote 2 years ago?
That's what I was.
As a lecturer, you have to revise how you teach, your teaching strategies, because you find that some of the students are not coping with how the module is written or how the assignment questions, the way you ask the questions. So you need to revise, you need to check every semester how your students are passing.
How many lectures like this do we have at Unisa that actually can engage with which questions students didn't answer, and then you adjust the next exam that will take place 2 years from now, because this assignment must go into the tutorial letter for 2021. Do you see the gap? I respect you, but there's this gap between how students do in this exam, but we've already set the exam paper for next semester. It's printed, it's there. Prof.
This is, I have to say, this is Dr. Matawi.
Oh no.
Yes, you know, this is Dr. Matawi, and Dr. Matawi inherited a model. She worked with me. She's actually my mentee. So what we did, we ran a philosophy of education course, and at the end of the year, we would sit down and look at our pass rates, we look at our dropout rate, and as the stats come in, once we sign off, we get the statistics, and it gives us a picture of where we are. So we would come back and say, where did we go wrong? And then we look into the student response, and we realize our pass rate last year was this because we did this and this and this. So we always went back and did a lot of things so I'm glad that she raised it, because I was sitting here waiting to see whether is she going to come up with the right answer. So bravo to that.
It's okay to think on question level. What happened in private law 101 5 years ago was that the pass rate dropped 20%, and the lectures were made to explain, and there was no significant difference in the questions asked.
Yes.
What made a difference that they wrote private law 101 with commercial law 101. It was a scheduling problem. Now you have lecturers looking at the exam paper and saying, oh, what did we do wrong? You didn't do anything wrong. Someone set the exam typo. So good practice, but what I want to allude to, and I will come back to, there's some things that impact on your course success that's outside the questions you ask, outside everything you do for your students, and that someone in management level decided to move the module in a different exam setting or there was an EFF or a DA strike and the student couldn't get. So there's other things. Nadine?
Just something that we're seeing currently is some of our models are moving fully online, whereas the rest is still the traditional, more correspondence model. However, in the online models, we don't see as much access, which is very strange. So we would need to go and have a look at how it's being marketed and how students perceive these fully online models. So, for example, the data will inform something like that.
Okay, so we will come back to that. I think data in both institutions are important. I have a gut feeling that we have so little engagement with our students that we must be data hungry. We must look for glimpses to say, this is, we don't see you ever in class, we don't see what you buy in the cafeteria, we don't know a lot of things about you, and we really, and I'm getting back to this, we really want to help you if we find the time and the resources. So we need evidence. So can we just go here? So what data do we need to inform our teaching support to evaluate students' learning? Now the bottom line is, unlike Turkish, there's a separation. And there's a separation of place, space, time, emotional separation. But it also allows these students some flexibility and choice. So in order to look for data, the data that we have of what takes place is teaching takes place 10 to 14 weeks depending on strikes and postponement of registration periods. We have about 10 to 14 weeks. The only data that we have of students with regard to pedagogy are the 2 assignments, if there's 2, if there's time for 2. 2 assignments coming in that is marked by a computer because we love MCQs. And then we sent a general feedback letter to the 5,221 students to say these are the mistakes in general that you've made. But we have 2 assignment marks marked by a computer. We have summative assessment, a mark, guided pedagogic conversation at Unisa. Nah, I don't think so. There's just not time, there's not, it doesn't, guided pedagogic conversation doesn't scale to 14,000 students in Economics 101. So we have so few data points. So when I talk about learning analytics and the use of student data, let me immediately acknowledge we have, on the one hand, lots of data, but it's scattered and maybe we don't have the right information, data, because our pedagogy is relatively data poor. Would you agree with that statement to say our pedagogy is data poor?
I would.
Students don't engage in the discussion forum. Those that engage have access to technology, have had money to buy data, as most probably students in a better socioeconomic class. So to use their online engagement data as an indicator of their success rate, it's a not, don't go there. What do you know about your students?
Yeah, that's the question I was going to ask.
You have a question?
Yeah,
yes.
I was going to ask the same question. Like, what do lecturers know about us
Good.
as students? And where do they get that?
Have you ever considered a job as a prophet? There's some money in there. What do you know about your students? I don't know the subjects that you teach, and I don't want to pick on people. Think of the module that you teach. What do you know of your students? Well, let's be honest. What do you know about your students?
I think the only time I get to know my students is when they are calling me or they are sending me an email to say, you know what, I won't be able to submit this assignment because of 1, 2, 3, 4. Then I'll know, okay, this person is going through this. So that's when you kind of know who they are. But really, we
other
don't-
5,449.
But really, it's impossible for us to be reading their data, to know their years and all that.
Well, listen to this narrative. It's impossible for you as a lecturer to really engage with the data Unisa already has of your students because you just don't, not because you don't care, but there's just not time to engage. Anyone else that would like to respond to that?
I think what we know can be sourced from the data we have. We got from students, for example, issues of access, issues of ownership of devices, mobile devices.
But in your module or at Unisa? General, but what module, what information do you have of your students in your module? Do you know how many males, females? Do you know how many black, colored, white, Indian? Do you know the age group? Do you know how many of them are employed? And is it important to know these things? There's one that says no. And I think we will get to that. It's one thing knowing that 50% of your students are unemployed. Will that make a difference in how you engage with them when they're late for an assignment? I think it will. I think it will help if I know this mother logs in after 11 o'clock at night. Her logging data on the Unisa system says she logs in after 10 at night. I just say, wow, what a woman. She most probably fed the husband, did the dishes, fed the kids, bathed the kids, put the kids to bed, and then she got to my Unisa. So when she sends me an email, if I remember, if I could have made the links between my 5,449 students, it would have enriched my teaching practice so much. And I will share some examples. So what do you know about your students? And I'm afraid we just don't have the time and the scale. We have too many students, 14,000 students in Economics 101. Do we want to know them? Because once you know them, you cannot unknow knowing them. And that's actually my last slide. Once you know, you cannot unknow knowing. Because with knowing comes responsibility. And that's scary, Nadine.
Shouldn't the question be, what is it that we need to know?
Wait, you're also a prophet. Is there any non-prophets in the room? Okay. Just before we get to Nadine's question, who at the student institution knows what about your students? How is this shared? Why can't you have an automated student profile sent to you after the closing date of registration? Would that have made a difference to say of your 14,000 students, so many are male and unemployed? And they need this bloody module to find employment. Would that make a difference? And it's automated, someone can do it, someone has the data. So many non-English speakers in your course. So many people that will most probably not have the financial resources to buy your bloody prescribed book that a colleague of yours wrote. Yes. What about the POPI Act? Tell me.
So if the institution is collecting this information as employees, as a lecturer module, what?
You have access to, and Unisa has a mandate to collect information in an aggregated format to say you have 557 male students of a black racial category that's unemployed. That data you have access to and you can use. Morel?
If you look at students with disabilities,
Yeah.
on the registration form, I believe
It's gifted information, they share it.
They can share it or they can decide not to share it.
And what do we do when they share it?
There is a push from Oxford side as well to try and let the lecturers know they have got students with disabilities to possibly provide more assistance to them, not just from the general rail exam papers, special access, that kind of thing. But that's the information that we can get about our students. But then if you've got masses of students, my question is, I'm going to try and treat all my students equally. Because at the end of the day, I've got the unemployed students who need to be to get a job, but I've got a working full-time students. And I do believe our demographics are changing more to the full-time, not working student. I have to just double check on that one. But I have to aim to satisfy everybody.
Okay, we're getting...
In my individual tuition, if I'm aware of someone and I can help them on an individual basis in a discussion forum or emails, I can help the individual. But if I'm structuring something for the group purposes.
Does equality work, or shall we go for equity? And I'm coming back to that. What scares me, the library has information. Student counseling has information of your students. Your students went to student counseling because they're going through a divorce and you don't know about it. Your students tried to phone you and you were fetching the kids from school and that call went nowhere. There's no record of that. Why can't students key in their student number, those with students number, when they dial like I do when I phone BestMed? They also don't answer their phones. But then at least they have it on record. Paul Prinsloo phoned and his phone rang for 20 rings and then he hung up. And that same Paul Prinsloo phoned the next day and no one answered. And then BestMed can actually call me 3 days afterwards and say, we see you were looking for us. Can we help you? Wow.
I'm dead right there.
So maybe, and I know there's not the right people in the room, but wouldn't it be magic if you get a statement to say, this is how many of your students were trying to contact you last week and you were really in another meeting scheduled by your boss? Would it make a difference if you know this student called 4 times? Would it make a difference? And why would it not make a difference? Okay, what don't we know about our students? What don't we know about our students? That if we knew, remember the unknowing part that once we know, that if we knew or had access to that data, it would have helped me to teach better. Let's just leave it, that question hanging in the room. What would you like to know about your students? I'm now teaching in an online master's degree and I don't have access to my students' data. I don't know their academic records. I don't, because the data is housed in Germany. I don't know whether they're married unless they disclose, they gift me the information. I don't know how many kids they have, so when I see she logs in 11:20 at night, I don't know why. I cannot build a story around the student. But then will that story matter if I have 11,000 of them? So how does it scale? What do we know about how they learn? We have 2 bloody formative assessments, multiple choice. Does it tell you anything except that the fact that they found the answer in the prescribed book? What does it tell you about how they learn? What does it tell you with what times of day they engage with their studies? Do they sit on a bus, a taxi? Would it help you if you knew? I think that's my only passion, is will it help me to know that she accesses my Unisa while waiting in the car for a husband because they share a car? Would it make a difference in how I see her learning journey? And there's a beautiful article out. We say learning takes place where? Where's that place? Where is the places where our students learn? Okay? How often and for what purpose do they engage with their peers, faculty? Okay, why do you need to know that? Why do you need to know about them, their lives, their learning journeys? I wonder sometimes if it's not a blessing not to know. But then will that make me an ethical teacher? Does that make I care enough?
Yeah, can I ask?
Yes, is that a question?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
I think it is important to know some of the things. I work in student counseling in the region, and sometimes there are cases like where you find, for example, students with hearing impairment, and as Unisa is going online, the lecturers will direct them to these online resources, videos and stuff without subtitles and stuff. So some information, if you know about it, I think it may help on how you assess them. But then the information is there in the regions, but somehow it's not coming to.
So why not? And some of this information most probably analog form, notes of a counselor that she made or he made on a piece of A4 paper. Why cannot we digitize that note and make that part of a student record? Please tell me if I'm in cloud 9 or from another planet. My partner says I am, so you may just confirm. Do they know that you are collecting, measuring, analyzing their data and using that data to evaluate and support their learning? Do they know that you look at how many times they're logging? If you do, I do. Would you mind if your line manager look at how many times you access my Unisa? And that's coming to your performance appraisals. Got news for you. That your line manager will get a statement to say, Nadine has not logged on for a week and she's teaching online. Or not. Or she's online, but whether she teaches, we don't know. Okay, do they know? And I think that's a big thing for me. The research that we've done at the Open University in the UK, students are unwilling to share the information because I know you want to make my learning better. But they know. Unisa students don't know. They sign the registration form. Okay. And under what conditions are the collection, measurement, analysis, and use of student data right or wrong? The ethics. And I know there's most probably a gray space. So it's under what conditions will it be right and under what conditions will it be wrong? And if you know, what can and will you do about the challenges they face? And that will be my last slide when I come back. Now that you know the student is falling behind, she missed the first assignment. Luckily, she only has to submit one assignment. Now that you know, what are you going to do? Who's going to reach out to her? And if not, why? And we say we're student-centered. We talk about Ubuntu, sorry, Prof. We say the African Renaissance. If that is not what the African Renaissance is, I don't want to be part of it, with all due respect. Because that's Ubuntu. To see that you've missed your first assignment, I care enough to call you. What information do they have that if they had a way or a reason to share it with you will help you to understand their learning journeys better, to support them more appropriately and evaluate them more fairly? How does that look on with 14,000 students? Will it make a difference if they send you, I'm pregnant and I'm having morning sickness? Will it make a difference if Paul sent you an email to say, I just tested HIV positive yesterday and I'm having a hard time? And why the fuck will it not make a difference in the way you mark his assignment? So what information do our students have that if they share it with you, it will make a difference in the way we teach? And do we care enough? So when we talk learning analytics, it's not about data, it's about caring. Caring in appropriate ways, effective ways, caring that will make a difference. But how do you scale that care to 40,000 students with one overworked lecturer that's in meetings the whole bloody time? Okay, Rika, what student data do we have? Where is this data stored, and why don't these data sources talk to one another? What data don't we have, and if we have access to that data, it may help us. What data do we currently use to teach better, and we don't use it? What data do students need in order to learn better? Will it help them to give them, to say, in this class, of this whole class, the mean or the average of the assignment marks are this? Will it help them? Will it help them to get an email to say, I see that you haven't logged on this week. Can I help in any way? Will it help them to make better choices? What data do they have, and if they would share it with us, would it help them to teach better? Okay, so that's the introduction, ladies and gentlemen. So let's just quickly look at the evolution of the use of student data, how we use data, who's doing the collection, how does it scale, and the possibility of algorithms, and the scary part there, making sense of my student data, 2 case studies, using student data surveillance, some principles, blah, blah. We have always collected information. This is not new. From medieval times, we've always collected information. So what has changed? In 2011, there was this bunch of white guys. They were white and they were white. That said, let's do something with the data students throw off. And I hate that term. I can never throw off data, and a point that to which I will come. Learning institution and corporation make little use of data learners throw off. I don't need it anymore in the process of assessing learning materials interacting with educators. And then they phrase this as a definition, and it's a definition that still stands. It's a measurement, the collection, the analysis, and the reporting of data about learners and their context for purposes of understanding and optimizing learning and the environments in which it occurs. We have a lot of this. There's academic analytics, where Unisa reports so many black students have not passed, so many white students have not passed. We reported to the CHE, to SAPWA. There's a lot of reporting there. Learning analytics is different. Learning in the analytics is to know that John hasn't submitted his assignment, or John can nowadays be her as well. John has not submitted her assignment, and I'm going to use that information to improve the learning. You think I make a joke about the John, that's a her. I had my first postgraduate supervisor at Unisa was a Roman Catholic nun with the name of John Henry. J-O-H-N. She pushed the boundaries in more than one sense. Her claim to fame was, I'm not okay, you're not okay, and it's okay. But John, the nun with whom I met weekly, she shaped my life in many ways. In the past, we only had demographic data, learning data at specific points, data application, class registers, assignments, summative assessments. Now we almost have a continuous digital, gifted and automated data just coming in. We don't look for it, it's there. Okay? Data use, we used to use data for reporting purposes, now we move to individualized learning. Who use data? Management, now increasingly researchers, and I'm coming back to that, faculty, students and support staff. Who did the collection? Humans. Now increasingly the collection is done by machines. It's historical data, now real-time data with real-time interventions. The default was forgetting, now the default is remembering. And there's a beautiful book by, a German guy, his name slipped me. He said the gift of forgetting in a digital age, where he says we don't forget anymore. It's Google never forgets.
Yeah.
We forget. I see some heads, I forget, but I don't have to remember anymore because I can find it.
I'm in Google, therefore I am.
Yeah. So aggregated data plus re-identified data, and that's a big thing. Even if I work with a de-identified data set, I need only 2 data points to identify you. So that's an interesting thing. Oversight. Normally, if I wanted to do research, I had to go through the ethical review board process. 20 signatures, 15-page forms. Now you use student data behind your computer, and I don't know what your biases are. I don't know how you use that data and what are the ethical implications. So who has oversight, and that's an increasingly interesting point. So we know all of these things of our data, of our students. And that's a rich picture. And we use this data to try to understand how they learn, try to discover why, what is happening there. Then we will say, students that share characteristics there seems to be more probable not to submit the next assignment, so we predict. And you will see every time I go up, the ethical implications get smaller. Okay? So then we will predict students like this category have a higher probability of not passing. Oh, and then we will say students like you can't do this course. And then every step of the way that the ethical implications get small. Here it's fairly harmless. What is happening in my class? Who passes this class? English second language students, black from a lower quintile school background. Why did it happen? What must we do to prevent this happening? Now we get to the point that we say students like you, and Prof spoke about categories. You cannot categorize me as a white gay male 60 years old with no children. And because I have these 5 characteristics, you don't want to give me a life policy. I will take you to court. But now with the latest registration period, students that wanted to do B.Ed honors, they could only allow 5,000 students. They got 30,000 applications. Of the 30,000, I think 20,000 met the minimum requirements. So then they said, if you're female, unemployed, over the age of 30, you have first access. So whether it's justified is ideological, but we categorize students and we use it to prescribe. But every time the ethical implications get small. What we forget that the students logging data, so there you have the student in the middle, students with a particular habitus and demographics, where the black, white, male, 30 years old, heterosexual, unemployed, blah, 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 apply to register, choose the qualification modules and start. We have macro societal factors impacting on that journey. He or she, there's a strike, there's economic downturn, there's a war, Trump sends a tweet and China increases tariffs and the world goes to war. There's a postal strike at Unisa. Remember the times that where Unisa still delivered study materials and suddenly there's a postal strike and this whole journey goes wrong? Not because students are black under the age of 30 and unemployed. They didn't get their materials. Private Law 101. The lecturers didn't do anything wrong, students didn't do anything wrong, but the exam date was changed. There's the institutional lecture interactions, inefficiencies, efficiencies and inefficiencies. Okay? And all of this impacts on whether the student passes. So that's why I'm so scared, colleagues, to use the number of times you've logged in as a predictor of your success, because there's a bigger picture. There's more. Lydia?
Yeah, in addition to what you said, doesn't predictive analytics work best in a stable environment?
Oh, what is stable, Lydia? She asked a very pertinent question. Does learning analytics work best in a stable environment? Predictive analytics, where stable?
Unstable.
If education is not in a laboratory, it's an open recursive systems. This year's profile students are totally different from last year's profile students. And yet, management requires you to increase your pass rate on this student's pass rate because of last year's students. So somehow Unisa has it wrong. We don't understand profiling, and education is an open and recursive system. But the plot thickens, so we collect data, but there's a lot outside, and you will see my one principle is our data are always incomplete and broken. We ask on the students' registration form, are you married? Yes. Single, widowed, divorced. I think that's the categories, okay? But then when I use the married category, you may be very unhappily married. Do you still fit in the married category? You're still living with someone. It's too expensive to divorce, so you're married. So now we use a married as a category to predict, oh, you're in an abusive relationship. You can be the abuser or the abused, but you're married, and Unisa ticks it off, you married. So our categories are what the sociologists call zombie categories. They just don't make sense anymore. This is how it looks, and I'm not going back there. You can find Prof. Lecheka referred to Prof. George Zabarski. This is still Unisa's understanding of student success. You will recognize the lines. There's a student, there's an institution, there's a student walk, and the shaping conditions. And that's the article. So we're looking for data points there, and that's where learning analytics happens. So who's doing the collection? Researchers, institutional analysts, faculty, support staff, administrators, management, algorithms. These people or these actors collect the information, and these people use the information. Now the scary thing where I'm getting to is algorithms increasingly use information and act. You apply for a home loan at ABSA and a human doesn't see it. An algorithm decides that a 60-year-old white male, close to retirement, no. So in open business learning, how does it scale? Colleagues, I cannot engage with 14,000 students. I cannot engage with 500. As I will share with you later, I cannot engage with 20 on a scale of how are you today. So how does this scale? What do you do when you have 500,000 students in private law 101 or 14,000 in economics 101? What do you do with the data? Are you the only one? Can you have a team, a support team, looking at the data and giving you every morning a report card, every week a report card? Will that help? I'm 3/4 down. There's light in the tunnel. And please take this, that looks much more complicated than I'm confident of producing. So you have seen processing, acting, learning. Paul sees SIPU hasn't logged on. Paul processes the fact that SIPU hasn't logged on. Paul sends SIPU an email, and Paul checks whether the email has made a difference in SIPU's behavior, and may send another email when he sees again. That's the humans performing the task. Paul has 40 students in his class. He cannot look at all the logging data. Paul uses an algorithm to see which students haven't logged on. The algorithm sends Paul an email to say, Paul, these students haven't logged on this week. Paul processes the data, Paul acts, and Paul learns. Or the algorithm can send the email. The algorithm can act and learn to say, the algorithm withdraws students from the sample to say these students haven't logged on. The algorithm sends an automated, personalized email to say, this is an algorithm speaking, which I think is authentic. We see we haven't logged on for this week. Are you okay? If you're not okay financially, phone this number. If you're going through a psychological problem, phone this number. If it's study related, phone this number. The algorithm can do that. The algorithm can check those students next week to see whether there has been a change in behavior. If there's no change in behavior, the algorithm can send another email to say, hello, anyone out there? We see you haven't responded, or can we call you? Center, please call me to the following number and there will be a human on the other side. Why can't we do that? Even for me it makes sense. Oh, sorry. So the algorithm can perform all these tasks and with the human supervision that I can just check. Because when algorithms, machine learning, it may then build in bias where the algorithm targets black males or black females, and we soon see that happening with Google. And that's the scary part, when algorithm goes through 30,000 students' application, and someone wrote the algorithm, and the algorithm decided who gets admission to the B.Ed. And when we use the same algorithm next year, the biases that informed the first one will just increase. Colleagues, but so this is where we're heading. This is where we already are. If you read the work by Frank Pasquale, Black Box Society, that's where banks are, that's where Uber is, that's where the world is going. That something decides whether I can or cannot fly. And I have no one to talk to. It was in the news yesterday from someone from Palestine that her visa was declined. Okay, she's Palestinian, she's an activist, she's over the age of 70, and there's no one to speak to. Her visa application has been declined. So working with data, a personal journey. Luckily, this one is close to home. A German master's degree, 15 weeks, 2 instructors, 1 support staff, 20 students. Weekly structure with assigned readings, activities, discussion forum requirement. In total, students must do in 15 weeks 3 tasks, 2 essays, 6 skill builder exercises, group work, structured learning journal. It's highly intensive for the instructor as well as for the students. It's masters. Okay? Students are expected to actively participate in the class, at least 1 substantive posting per week, plus respond in a substantive way to other students. That's the course requirements. You enroll, this is the name of the game. The data that I as an instructor in this course have access to, I have access to their gender. Why? Because they posted their profile pic. They gifted the information. In this class, there's 2 students that haven't shared their profile pic, but they have traditionally male names, and they act like males. Okay, so the gender, I have their employment status, they all from a particular institution. Educational background, I have some ideas, some people would have shared that data. I have access only to their 20 last logins. That's the only digital data I have access to. And gifted information, I hurt my back last week. Can you give me an extension? That's the data I have. These are their logins. Female, mid-30s, judge on her picture. She hasn't disclosed this. I just try to bring in a nuance there. She's most probably mid-30, and I think this maybe is a compliment. She's made older. She contributes frequently. Excellent assignments. These are the last 20 logins. The underlined ones are the post office hours. 1866, 5:15, 8, 11:30, 6. Female, late 40s, little to no engagement. Failed her first assignment. But look how many times she logs in after hours. Male, mid-30s, little to no engagement, average assignment. Okay. Now, Unisa would have said, excellent assignment, number of logins, that's a correlation. The more you log in, the more successful you will be. Nah. What I don't know is, what does this mean? And I want to share my dilemma with you. When I pulled this or screenshotted this information for this presentation, I was wondering, what does this mean? How can I support her better? But I only have 20 students in my class. I can ask that question. I can send an email to say, are you okay? I see you logging late at night. Are you okay? Yeah, because she failed her first assignment. I think I have a responsibility to say, how can I support you? I see this. Is there something you want to talk about? How can we make you pass? This one, I don't know. So, this is my response. Hi, I noticed from the data on the course site, she must know, or he must know that I saw the information, that you have only logged in once on 18 March, 5 days after the course started, and not since. I know this pre-week, this is a pre-week, but we just wanted to check whether you are okay and ready to go. Getting to know a new learning platform may be daunting, but eventually one gets used to finding one's way. Let us know if there's anything we can assist you with. Wishing you all of the best. I wrote, of the class of 20, I wrote 16 such emails. An algorithm could have done that. She didn't respond. No change in behavior. Dear, I sent an email on 28 March. I sent this on 31 March. And it would seem as if you either did not receive the previous one, or that you may have issues in accessing the course site. This course has officially started today. We would really like to assist in any possible way. Please let us know if you need any guidance and support. For me, this is teaching. And I'm not making me an angel, anything, but that is how I use student data. I don't know why she doesn't log on. Just talk to me. I want to help. Okay? So reflection. The learning design is immensely intensive for both instructors and students. Trust me on that one. Students could not afford to fall behind. We know it's 12 weeks of hell. If they start late, it's hell for them and the instructors, because assignments will be coming in late. You will have all these requests for submitting. Can I submit mine? And then it just goes haywire. Students find a high level of engagement and amount of readings overwhelming. Yes, we get that. The only data that I had access to was their last 20 logins and the information they gifted. I wish some form of algorithmic automated system could have alerted me when students haven't logged on. So because they don't engage with the discussion forum, because they're overwhelmed, I don't have a sense where they are. So I must click on every student's profile to look at when last did they log in. And I do that every morning, 6 o'clock. To just check, they my sheep. And I see myself as shepherd, or I'm trying to be. And often I think I'm the sheep. While having access to the login data proved immensely helpful in the context of this course, looking for the data and responding to them were also very taxing and time-consuming. If not nerve-wracking, I'm so scared I make a wrong assumption. It's nerve-wracking in the sense of, did I miss something? Yes, sir. That's the only data I have.
I want to cite an example with my students. I was supervised by one professor. I only get in one if I had a problem, I knew that the field is my problem. So we get inseparable. So if a student was in safety, doesn't mean that only as a problem.
No, and I didn't say it's a problem, but there's a pattern that they don't access their work site or the study site from work. They use their home computer, they use their personal data, and these are the times for whatever reason. So I don't make a judgment. Then this logging data, they're also not elsewhere in the course.
It's a patterns.
It's a package deal. They don't contribute to the discussion forum. They're required to do so. I'm trying to make sense of their journey. So you're very right to say the fact that they didn't log in doesn't mean that they don't learn. But in this course,
the learning takes place in the discussion forum. They must post, they must respond, they must engage. So if they're not there, I look for where are you. So, but it's very important what you're. So logging data is broken data, but that's what I have.
Because what's more important is social presence.
Yes. You will see in the next example, I will get to your point. So yes, I could do it because I have a 1 to 20 student. How does this level of engagement look when you have 400, when you have 14,000? And I think that's my dilemma, and I want to share with you what is possible, how it can be used, and then make sense of it. Case study 2, same course, but this time in the US. Different privacy regimes, different protection of privacy. Very hectic students. If you hear of Americans taking everyone to court, nah. I was scared to send feedback to a student. I failed a student only once, and then she took me to the Senate. I never failed a student again. The same course, but in the US, but I had more data to work with. I had a range of logging data, but the course was structured differently. It was a different LMS. This is what it looked like. I had an overview of my class, 30 students. I could see at this stage, the student A visited 71 times, and logging was 30. They could go to different parts of the site. That student visited 9 times, but at 31 loggings. Very interesting. Okay? Wait, go back. This is student H. This was 5 weeks into the course, hasn't visited at all. Mayday, Houston, we have a problem. Okay? That student 4 loggings. This student 18, 12 loggings. So what does it mean? But I also had more. Student A, she scored 95, he scored 95% for the assignment, 100% for the biography, 30 loggings. She spent 6 hours, 38 minutes and 55 seconds. Whether she stayed logging and went to the toilet, I don't know. But at 5 weeks into the semester, that's the amount of time she spent with the content. Discussions she posted, she read, I could see how many times she read someone else's posts. She read 521 other students' posts. Now you must know how hectic it was for the instructors, because the instructors most probably read all 700 posts. She created 11 original posts, and she responded to other students' posts 54 times. 5 weeks into the semester. This is hectic stuff. Logging history, days visited, 17 days of the 25 possibility. Student J, 4 loggings, scored 100% for his or her biography and plagiarism assignment, but failed the essay. In this class, it was 30 students. We had 2 instructors, 1 support staff. I didn't see, let's call him John. I didn't see John was not participating. Somehow I didn't have the time to check these stats. Because I was responding to posts, I was marking assignments, I was grading, I was everywhere. And then one day I realized John did not submit his assignment. 2 weeks after the closing day. Then I went back to these stats and I said, but he hasn't logged in for 2 weeks. Where's John? And that resulted in this blog post. Failing our students, not noticing the traces they leave behind. I felt terrible. So I wrote John an email to say, I'm sorry, I should have picked this up, that something is happening. You've been missing in action for 2 weeks. You haven't submitted your assignment. Is there something I can do to help? And he didn't respond to the email. He was an American student. I couldn't phone.
So yes, so this block is a very deeply reflective exercise. How could I miss? It was one student in 30, and how did I miss that? How could I afford to miss that? Colleagues, I'm wrapping up. If these data tell a story, whose story is it? Is this the whole story? Your point? Who's listening? Anyone out there? What did we miss? So there's some concerns. Google is tracking students as it sells more products to schools. So when institutions use Blackboard or Desire to Learn or all these official providers, I'm not sure about Sakai, there's people that use this data to... So Google has come to Africa to say, we can give you Facebook Lite, but that's to get access to millions of students' data to sell them more products. Cafe swaps espresso for personal info. This is a Japanese cafe that you can get espresso. I love espressos. For free if you would swipe your card. Because if I swipe my card, they can build up a profile, and they're willing to give me a free espresso every time I swipe my card. Universities are tracking students. Is it clever or creepy? I hope my students, my class, don't think I'm creepy when I write to them and say, are you okay? But there is a thin line. There is a thin line. From high school to Harvard, students urge for clarity on privacy rights. So it has not reached our shores yet. I'm waiting for the decolonize our data debate, where learning analytics violates student privacy. And that's your point, and I think that's where the point where Unisa must really look. According to Popeye, we have the mandate and the privilege to, you work with our student data on an aggregated format. It's our mandate. We don't need permission, they signed the form. But we need their mandate when we use their data to change their learning journey. We need their consent. If the original reasons for us collecting the data has changed, then we need consent. So knowing more also means having greater responsibility to make informed, tentative, appropriate, and ethical decisions. Ethics in learning analysis, if you're interested, there's some stunning stuff out there, really grappling with not being creepy. Can a student opt out to say, I don't want you to look at my number of logins? And that's okay. As long as they know that I will not see that they're not there anymore. So it's a reciprocal negotiation. If I can have access to your logging, I can help you. This is how I will use this. But if you don't want me to look, then it should be an option for them. Okay? This is one of the first articles published on learning analytics, the ethical issues. It was by myself and Sharon Slade. The Open University has a policy on the ethical use of student data. And I'm getting back to, so this was the first university in the world that got a policy to say it's important when we use student data for learning, for teaching, we need a policy and ethics. Learning analytics is an ethical practice. I love that. Coming from the Brits, I love it. And it should align. The OU has a responsibility to all stakeholders to use and extract meaning, I don't like that part, from student data for the benefits of students. Students should not be wholly defined by their visible data. I love that. They said, I'm more than my data. I'm more than my logins. There's a poll outside. Adoption of learning analytics requires broad acceptance. The university is transparent, so students know. Students should be engaged as active agents in the implementation. So the Open University actually has a meeting with student representatives to say, this is the data we will use for this purposes. This is who will have access to this data. You can opt out. Students should not be wholly defined. Okay, so I don't know why these slides are. Okay, the interesting thing is that and I alluded to this, that it falls not under the research policy. So we at Unisa, when I want to do research on my students, I need ethical clearance that are assigned, how I will prevent bias and blah, blah, blah. When you do learning analytics, you don't need clearance. And this was a cross-institutional case study from Indiana Open University in Unisa. So is it research? What is it, and what will we do with the ethics? Guys, I'm closing. This is by the Siapu Mandela project in the South African context. It's available. You can have a look at it. There's just some principles. I'm not going to go in there. Then what about it in the African context? The global South, the decolonizing perspectives. Some guiding principles, and I'm closing. We have a moral, relational duty of learning analytics. If you have come to help us, you can go home. If you have come to accompany us, please come. Let's talk. I think for me, that's the first principle. I'm not using you to your data. It's your data. Can I come into your space? Can we talk about your data? Can we find out what it means? What does married mean? And can we say, this is how I will use your data, but how does it scale to 14,000 students? Student success is entangled. It's messy. Logging data is in the middle there. There's a lot happening. So what does logging data mean? Nothing at the end. And yet everything for me, that's the only point I have. Understanding student data is broken and framed, but also acting and framing. Once we define the student as at risk, that category carries, she or he carries that category throughout Unisa. And it stays part of her record forever and ever. Till death do us part. Unless Poppy says after 5 years, we must destroy records. I don't know. So we frame people, but it's also framing. This is a beautiful article. Yes, sir.
Besides the principles that we need, what other tools we have?
What other theories can we help?
Help us to understand
The learning analytics don't have it. It's now an emerging discipline. It's basically between surveillance studies, political studies, surveillance studies, and learning sciences. So there's no real theory. I started my journey in learning analytics looking at surveillance studies. How we surveil immigrants, how we surveil blacks, how we surveil females. So there's a huge body of research there.
I'm saying this because I see problems of
There's ethics everywhere.
yeah. What is what is ethical and what is unethical?
That's the next presentation. No. What will be ethical in my response to that student? I don't think I was unethical. But it has to be negotiated. There has to be consent that I don't want you to ask me about my husband that lost his job. So that's why the first principle is relational. That's where the ethics starts. But we must know the implications. Data is not necessarily accurate, complete, or full aggregated representations of individuals or societal groups. And the whole apartheid, the way we classify people, is a case in point. This for me is important. Student data are not something separate from students' identities, their histories, their being. Students' data are an integral, albeit informational part of students' being. In the light of the view that data are not something students own, but rather who they are, what are we assuming when we say we collect their data? So if I am my data, what do you do when you collect me? And that's why you can have a look at Luciano Floridi. He's at Oxford. He wrote this thing on ontological interpretation of information privacy, that he says, I cannot give my data away. I cannot give you permission to collect my data. I can give you permission to be a steward of my data, but it stays mine. I can withdraw that consent at any time. How much control do students have to determine what data institutions harvest to challenge the meaning of their data in our categories? Can students redefine, alter our interpretations of data? Can they offer us counter narratives to our understanding of their learning and their life worlds? And can students opt out of personalized data and use and have their data deleted? If they don't know what we collect their data, the scope and the purpose of collection, how will we use their data, and how it will impact on their learning journeys, how is it ethical? We have a co-responsible, their journey is our journey. If we go down, they go down. So we will have to find a middle ground. What happens in their lives impacts on ours and vice versa. Last one, data is a conversation, and then you cannot unknow. The elephant in the learning analytics room, the obligation to act. Once we know, and that's a law principle, you have the obligation to act. And then you can have a look at this article. Colleagues collecting, analyzing, using student data may assist them and us to make more appropriate and responsible choices. I thank you. Sorry, Prof, I went over.
No, it's beautiful. We have until 12. We still have a question and answer. No, thank you very much. Wow. Gee, I knew that when I invited Paul that there's going to be quite a mouthful, and I'm glad. I'm really delighted. You opened up a whole Pandora box of very, I think, very delicately pertinent issues that we need to deal with on a regular basis. I worked at the Human Sciences Research Council for 8 years, and our job there was to collect data. We did lots and lots of multi-million runs based longitudinal studies. And Dr. Makoe always insisted that you are not going to start this research before you have collected data on the gender, location, demographics, but also on the socio-economic status. Do you know if the people you're talking to or about, are they educated? What are their educational levels? Are they employed or are they employed? You cannot begin inferring about people before you know about them. However, the HSRC also had a very strong ethics policy. When you do all these things, please bear in mind that there's an ethics policy that should govern how you conduct your activities. I think the point of the matter was recognition of the importance for us as researchers to know who we are talking to, but also to know that the ethics policy places constraints on us not to just go into the field and gather data, but know that we have ethical responsibilities. I then did a job, Paul, for the presidency in 2011 to 2014. I was a consultant in the presidency for the Human Resource Development Council, and I had to study how to make schools better. But to do that, we needed to know how the districts are operating. The presidency gave me R1 million to run a study. I got Jed to do the study, and we went into districts. The shocking part of it, which brings me to why I invited you here, was when we spoke to the district's education officers, we found a mess, a huge mess, and a mess that was based on the fact that the people who were, well, I think someone put it very bluntly to us that the whole team had been montaged. Now, you know the expression when you are montaged. Do people know what it means to be montaged? It was cadre deployment. So there were lots of people who were placed in districts who made demands for support and everything else. They had wonderful sedans, but they were supposed to reach schools in the rural areas. They didn't, you understand? They didn't even know where the schools was. My team went to a district. It took the officer, I think, about an hour and a half to locate the school. In the end, they gave up on the school. Now, I want to leave you with that. But I think what has emerged from this presentation, and I want to thank Paul for that, to me, is the importance of data. How do we get our hands on data? What do we do with the data? How do we collect it? Do we understand our responsibilities? I like the fact, Paul, that it's an engagement. I want to get into a space. The tendency is to say we are experts, we are researchers, we're going to the field, we're going to gather information, and we're going to write about it, we become professors, that's it. Now, that's unethical. So I like the fact that we should be looking at data as an engagement. We want to come into a space, do you allow us? And if you don't, it's informed consent. If you don't, it's okay. Okay? But I think the importance of this presentation for me is how do we create that capacity, that knowledge base here at Unisa? I think for many of you, you can see how complicated this is, but it points, for me, it points to a bigger issue. To what extent is Unisa investing in ensuring that we as academics, for example, have capacity in the way we manage data? Because that data will enable us to understand our students. How well are we capacitated to even understand the ethical premises that should guide the way we go about managing that data? To what extent are colleges doing that? I mean, Nadine, you understand how data is. How many people do that here? So for me, that's key. My secretary here and I have just completed a project management course with a program at UCT called Get Smarter. It's a consortium of all the universities. And I'm mentioning this because when you speak about logging in, we went through a very wonderful experience where you log on to a particular page, you engage. If you don't engage, if you don't load up, you are not going to move to the next step. And when you move to the next step, there is a box on the right, it ticks. So it forces us to engage, but that's an algorithm. It's a system thing. But that system helps that the course moderators don't have to pursue us. We cannot move to the next step until we've completed. And when you complete that conversation, the system ticks you. And then you can open up another. And these are all aspects of how we do. So with that, I think this is very, very, very useful. I open the floor for questions, comments, burning issues. And I think Paul is not the only person here to answer questions. We need to share. This is, I want to ask to treat this as a sharing environment. There is lots and lots, I think from even the questions you asked, I gathered that there are lots and lots of experiences. You might not have the answers to it, but I don't have the answers, Paul might not have the answers, but it's important that we are all here. Hey, by the fact that we're working it, we are all smart, intelligent people. Let's share. The floor is open. I'll pause for hands. Yes.
I'm not sure if it's a question or a comment, or my concern lies more on an institutional level currently. There's a very strong drive from ICT for lecturers to use the Microsoft platform. In terms of Microsoft Teams, but I don't have any idea what is the agreement in terms of the use of data, because if it's a Microsoft package, you can only imagine what type of data they will have access to. It's the emails of these students. It's not a student email account, it's the email account, the primary email. So for me, that's of real concern too. If we move away, we assume that with Sakai there's some kind of an agreement, and that's only Unisa related, but now by default, what happens with Microsoft? I don't know.
That's a comment. We'll take another, and can we have more? Let's not take one by one. Yes, sir, the back.
You refer to the one of the things that I'm slightly concerned about right now is that we work with this imagination of Unisa as a macro institution. I can't give you all the exact figures. I know with application data from this year, 15 qualifications accounted for 60% of the applications. So it's a big area with a very long tail. And if we are going to think about learning analytics, we almost need to think about two institutions. There's this one institution that accounts for a large number of our students, but a small number of our programs, where the modules are 14,000 and 10,000 and 5,000 students sit. And you need one kind of imagination when you work with those modules. But a very large percentage of our lecturers work in the long tail, where they have 50 or 120 or 150 students. And we need a totally different imagination around learning analytics. So I kind of just want to flag that, because I'm always anxious when we when you constantly imagine that, oh, this is this macro institution with 50,000 students in a module, and we excuse ourselves also. So, but you have to understand, we work at Unisa, there's some, but no, actually some of us actually only need to account to 100 students. so don't use the macro institution excuse there. So how do we think about these 2 or maybe 3 institutions within the institution?
Okay, let's take the last one.
Just a comment. I think what is happening at Unisa is that the lecturers, they have massive responsibilities. It's like you are a jack of all trades and master of none. I have to do the administration work. I have to be in my Unisa. The support staff, it's minimal. And the other things, as much as we have the Department of Counseling and the other departments collecting data, if I have a blind student, I don't know about it at the beginning of the semester. I'll only know when I'm preparing for the exam. So that affects our teaching as well. So I think there's a miscommunication between the other departments, and then we also have the e-tutor department. Still, I have to be the one who's monitoring the e-tutors. Why is it not like the head of the e-tutor system or somebody in that section monitors what the e-tutors are doing? So at the end of the day, we are overworked, and then the teaching and learning suffers. That's
and you have to pass the students.
And I have to pass the student at the end of the day.
Okay, Paul, well, you want to tackle the issue of Microsoft. I thought it was a very fascinating issue.
I think when Unisa goes into an agreement with any provider, it will be on terms and conditions. So there must have been. So I'm not scared about the privacy issues with that agreement. I'm more scared of students' access to the Microsoft package. So that's another issue. I love, if I may,
yes,
I love the imaginaries that we. It's also how student data look for students that are fully offline. That still submit hard copies of the assignment. Feedback on that hard copy assignment is so important, and we just don't have time. So it's not only imaginaries with regard to these large courses where I think we really must think algorithmic decision making, and then for these other courses, smaller courses that are equally important to think how will this work, this level of engagement, work and response, but also with regard to fully online, digitally supported, internet supported and fully offline. How do we work with data? And I think the major concern I have is we have amazing sources of data. Student counseling have amazing sources of data. The student retention unit has amazing sources of data. And yet these data sources don't talk to one another. What other institutions do are 2 things that, no matter how big the course in which part of the imaginary falls, 2 things. Students get a dashboard to say, this is what our sense making of your learning. This is our sense making based on our criteria of your learning. Does it make sense to you? So the relational aspect, actually at Edinburgh they have a course where students can tick how often they want feedback reports and whether they want a graph or whether they want a narrative. And then the beautiful part is that it's computer generated, but then after every category, whether it's engagement or formal assessment, there's a part where the student can talk back to the algorithm, where the student can talk back and say, you have it wrong. Yes, I did not engage last week, but it's not because this is a real reason. So it's that relational aspect. So I really would love us to move to say, how can we enter into a relational agreement with our students in a particular module to say, what data do we have of you and how can we use this data to support you to be successful? something like that. But I would love to take up the issue with you afterwards in the sense of how to make sense in these different imaginaries. I think that's beautiful.
A scary part. 2 weeks ago, I think, a week or 2 weeks ago, there were reports of, I think, a Middle East PhD student who killed her supervisor. Yes, following a discussion on the thesis. Nobody knows what transpired, but the bottom line is that the professor died. And I was thinking about that, Paul, when I brought it in. And the question that kept creeping in my mind was, what could have gone wrong? Well, I'm not doing robotics. What could go wrong? But I think it comes back to your center, to student counseling. And I wanted to think about that. There's so many things that can go wrong. How can we engage on that? Are we likely to be killed because we don't know much about our students? Yeah, and what can be done to mitigate that? And I think, Paul, this is where the whole idea of I think your distinction about learning analytics and academic analytics, how do we bridge that gap? How do we ensure that there is a very strong, powerful correlation between the two? So I'm throwing that as an issue for discussion. Prof, please.
Yeah. The scary part is the unknown.
The thing that you're talking about,
yes.
There's this people when the boyfriends came to the relationship.
I know the case.
And one thing I saw the person consent. My girlfriend is a distinction with you. How do you?
Yes. The boyfriend was a professor. No, no, the professor, because they knew more about Unisa than us.
Yeah, from living analytics perspective, if we had that thing, then that required us to do essentially.
But that's a scary part.
Yes.
In Kenya, and I will not mention the university, it's a face-to-face institution. Lecturers are required by law to submit the attendance registers to the local police office on Friday afternoons. Because if you're Muslim, male, and over the age of 21, and you haven't been in class for this week, most probably you're a terrorist. And that's the scary part is, wow, that one is an outlier, and this student killing her supervisor as or his supervisor as are most probably outliers. Is what data would have predicted that? And then we're back at the US system of if you're Palestinian and an activist and you're anti-American, we deny you a visa. So that's why I'm very careful when we work with categories. To say people like you have a higher propensity to kill your lecturer. Our at-risk categories are anyway problematic for me. When students are defined as at risk or problematic. Yeah. So when we get to that point, I would like to focus on the other side, is to say, is which students' behavior gives me an indication that they may be in need of better understanding of either the work or of me of him, and start there as a conversation, not as a category.
I'll come back to you, please.
Yeah, mine is just maybe a comment, Prof. And thanks for the presentation. I see you are talking about collecting data in ODL and how the context is different from TKIS. But then, being in the region, sometimes it feels like you are at a residential university. Students are coming every day for tutorial classes, library and stuff. So I'm a little bit confused, and I know it's one of the themes in the upcoming conference. So sometimes you get lost in that.
I think it would be lovely if students would swipe their card when they enter the region.